Welcome to the Rocky Mountain AI Interest Group. The following presentation, entitled AI Voice Technology, took place on March the 12th, 2025 at the Aerospace Engineering Sciences Building on CU Boulder's East Campus. Presentations were made by Trevor Uptain, Daniel Ritchie, and Chris Robbins. Chapter markers are provided below in the description field for you to navigate to each of these presentations.
Let me give you a little context about tonight. So we're going to cover the evolving landscape of voice AI. It's an area of technology that's rapidly advancing, and it's kind of reshaping industries, creativity, and human interaction. From a big picture, we're going to go from large-scale automated conversations to real-time voice cloning and AI-driven media production. So we're covering a pretty wide swath of this. Voice AI is moving from futuristic promise to everyday reality, and we're going to see that. And it's really transforming customer interactions and enhancing areas like robotics. So tonight we're going to explore how are AI-driven voices built, scaled, and applied from highly regulated industries to hands-on creative applications. And by the end of tonight, I hope you gain insights into the technical challenges, emerging opportunities, and real-world use cases shaping the future of voice AI. So these are our speakers for tonight. We're going to start with Trevor. Trevor joins us from Boston. He came all the way from Boston to speak, so that is awesome. And then we're going to go to, and Trevor's head of engineering at MedicareVox. Then we'll go to Daniel Ritchie, who's the founder of Brainwave Collective, and then Christian Robbins, who's co-founder of $11 Bill. So let me introduce our first speaker, and I will ask Trevor to come up. Trevor Uptain is head of engineering at MedicareVox, where he leads the development of voice AI solutions tailored for the insurance sector. He's going to delve into the current voice AI landscape, discussing the challenges of scaling from a few calls to millions and managing conversations ranging from brief interactions to hour-long discussions. He's going to address engineering design hurdles in building these systems. Before his tenure there, he contributed to Google's core machine learning team and held software engineering positions at several rapidly growing startups. He also won the RMAIIG pitch competition called Chat Tank. He was the winner of Chat Tank and has a cheesy bowling trophy to prove that. So please join me in welcoming Trevor Uptain.
So while we're getting set up, I would like to do a quick poll. So can everyone raise your hand if you have spoken or talked or otherwise interacted with a voice AI? Oh, that's awesome. So pretty much everyone in the room. Who has done anything with 11 Labs, maybe cloned your voice or done some text-to-speech? That's great. I would say about a half or maybe a third of the room. And then is there anyone in the room who is working in the voice AI industry and like building for voice AI? That's great. That's great. Maybe like 4 or 5 people. So that's fantastic. So the title of my talk today is Voice AI, the Past, Present, and the Future. Before I jump in, I'll introduce myself. I met Dan, as he mentioned, at the Chat Tank pitch night when I was here in Boulder. But I've been in Boston for the past year, working for a Y Combinator-backed startup in the insurance space, building voice AI calls. We built calls or voice AI that screen for Medicare. We do health risk assessments, all sorts of applications, and our goal is really to do a full insurance enrollment with voice AI, and there are a lot of challenges ahead. In Boston, I try to stay active in the AI community. I host my own meetup. The series is called Coding Without Knowing Code. If I were to start it today, I would probably call it Vibe Coding 101. And it's just me sitting with my laptop with no plan, and I write code and build things in front of a bunch of people. It's really fun. And I was lucky a couple of weeks ago to give a prompt engineering talk at Northeastern. So I'm very excited about what we're working on, and I just want to share it with everyone. I think it's really cool. And even if you're not working in voice AI, I hope you can take some of my lessons learned away and apply it to your own AI applications. So this is just a sneak peek. If you're entering the market, this is what we're looking at. The cost of folks waiting on hold and leaving the call due to IVR systems in the US is about $1.5 trillion per year. So this is a huge market. It's growing rapidly, and I can tell you firsthand that voice AI is coming. It's doing real calls. It's sort of eating those calls from the ground up. So this is sort of the good news if you're going into the voice AI market. And I guess in some ways, this is a little bit of the bad news. It's a very crowded space. There are a lot of entrants in voice AI. From Y Combinator alone, there are probably 10 or 20 startups. And if you look in the insurance section, MedicareVox is like a tiny logo in the insurance section, but we're on the map too. So just like the whole industry, there are all sorts of new tools coming out every day and lots to play with and experiment with and learn from. But I have two goals today. I would like to, first of all, just kind of catch you up on the state of the industry, where we're at. And then I want to give you a clue as to how to build great voice AI systems if you're starting from the ground up, and how to scale those and actually make them good and make voice AI that folks want to talk to. So we'll talk a little bit about why IVR systems are bad. We'll talk about how to make a voice AI that you want your parents to talk to. We'll talk about scaling to millions of calls, and then I'll give you a sneak peek at what I think is the most exciting and important things to pay attention to in the future of voice AI. So I almost hesitated to talk about why IVR systems are bad because I think we all know. When you're navigating the IVR call tree, you're essentially just stuck waiting on hold, maybe for an hours, at least for an indeterminate amount of time. You get pretty frustrated, and it almost feels like a battle. The IVR system map is here on the left, and imagine just starting at the top, and you're trying to race to the bottom to get to a human, and they're trying to stop you every step of the way, right? They're trying to solve your problem. I think the intentions are maybe good. They're trying to, at least in some way, solve your problem with technology, but I think we all know that doesn't really work. IVR systems, pressing 1, 2, or 3, can't really do that. And so my company and all the other companies on the market map are working to replace these IVR systems, this multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. And here's what it looks like. It's very simple compared to IVR. Now we're just building agents who have access to tools, to documentation, to memories, to memory maybe of previous calls. And these systems can even navigate an IVR tree on their own, right? They don't require pressing 1, 2, or 3. They may be stateful in some ways, similar to the way that IVR is stateful, but in general, they just have access to tools. So what you could, like the graph is maybe a little simple, right? You can imagine the state of a voice AI kind of being like one state per level of the IVR tree. You're in step 1, maybe the only option is to move forward, but you get to step 2, there are a bunch of tools available that could actually help you to end or terminate the call or to actually solve your problem. So it's very exciting. It's great to hear people interacting with these AI, especially in the space that we're in. A lot of the older folks are like very grateful to talk to an AI instead of navigating through an IVR tree. There's like a lot of thank you, ma'am, or I appreciate your help today. So I would like to tell you, I've learned a lot of lessons, I guess, over the past year building voice AI, and I would like to impart some of those to you. If you have a business that could benefit from voice AI, or even if you just want to build a project on your own, here are some of the things you should do and some of the things you should not do. So the first one that you should do is to build stateful agents that focus on the task at hand. Someone was asking me before this talk, did you train, like fine-tune a model to interact with the caller really well, like a specialized model? And the answer is no. We tried that at first. And we found, at least at this early stage, it doesn't really work. And actually what works is to limit the scope of the AI's attention to the task at hand. What you really want is the minimum prompt that you can give it, the minimum number of tools that you can give to the AI for the task at hand. Let the foundational model do the work in the same way that you let like a power tool do the work. Secondly, prompt the AI on what to say. Don't tell it exactly what to say. I've seen a lot of voice AI engineers fall into the trap of a very programmatic voice AI. So it almost ends up being an IVR system where it's saying the exact same thing to every caller. You really want to give the AI like a general idea of what it should be doing in that task, but let it continue to respond naturally to the caller. Finally, at the end of the call, just end the call. Make sure there are no delays. Transfer it, end it, pass it off to a human, do what you need to do. Don't let it dilly-dally. My don'ts are, don't give the AI a huge system prompt and a bunch of tools all at once. What the LLM will want to do is call 3 tools in the same second, or do exactly what you told it not to do at every step of the way. Kind of if you tell it, don't do this, it increases the likelihood that it will do that thing by about 10x. In terms of deployment, right, don't ever send it to a real human until you've done a ton of iteration and improvement. And then the final one is, if you're building for someone else, like another team, they're going to ask you to make a bunch of changes. Don't let them do that. Most of the changes that they request will be pretty bad. So think about your user, think about the actual caller, and really build for them. I have a few quick additional tips if you're doing long calls. So we went from about 1-minute calls to now about 20-minute calls doing health risk assessments. So some things I found useful in the long calls are at certain points during the call, for us around halfway through or around 3/4 of the way through, let the user know they're like almost done, encourage them, tell them to stick with it. Number 2 is notice when the users are frustrated. You almost want like a supervisor, LLM, on the call, noticing when bad things happen, and always give them an opportunity to bail out to a human. If you are doing a long task, make a note that the user has already done the health risk assessment or the task, and if they call back a second time, make sure to not let them do it again, just forward the call to a human. And then finally, if the call is too long and it's like a big stateful thing, let them pick up halfway through. We have on these longer calls, a lot of people get halfway through and they're like, I don't really know the answer to a question. Let me call you back later. Make sure when they call back that they don't have to go through the first 10 minutes again. Give them a way to pick it back up. So maybe some obvious lessons learned in hindsight, but they are very important. Here is how to scale to millions of calls. So this was the most painful lesson I have learned in the past year, because you do a lot of work to build a voice AI, and you call it 1,000 times, and you get it just right. But at that point, your job is about 5% of the way done. Now you have to go send it to real humans. So these are my suggestions for deploying your calls to real humans. So before you deploy anything, test and iterate, call it, think about your mom and dad, make at least 100 test calls. 1,000 is better if you can loop your team in, and make sure it's as good as you can get it. 0 to 10 calls, bring in your team and leverage them to catch all of the things you didn't even think about because you were focused on the code. Even better if you can get maybe like 10 calls from your team and then 10 calls from real humans. That will probably give you a huge list of things that you need to change. Then send 100 real human calls to the AI. And what you're mostly going to be doing there is probably not system changes or code changes, but prompt changes, like changing the way that it interacts to specific scenarios, things you would have never thought of if like a human who had no idea about voice AI was interacting with your system. For 100 calls to 10,000 calls, really leverage the LLM. So you want to think about where are people leaving the call, getting frustrated. Use an LLM to tag it every time that someone gets frustrated and like reason why, and always surface that in Slack or elsewhere. Make a bunch of charts, understand why people are not sticking with it or why they're having a bad experience. When you're going from 10,000 to 100,000 calls, you're gonna have a lot of data, almost like an overwhelming amount of data. And that's where you can really fine-tune those long-tail improvements that affect anywhere from like 1% to 5% of users that you might not have noticed on the smaller batches. And then from 100K to a million calls, I think this is still a little dubious for me. Like we have done it, but it's hard. But what you really want to do is find ways for the AI to improve itself. And there are some systems coming out that kind of do that on its own. But what you really want to do to succeed and let the system run on its own without human intervention is build in ways for the AI to improve itself. So I would like to touch briefly on the future of voice AI. And rather than diving into, I have like a very noble vision, I think, of what voice AI looks like in the future, but I don't want to bore you with that. So I'm gonna talk about one thing that's pretty new and very exciting to me, and that thing is MCP. I think it's something that everyone in this room should be paying attention to, even if you're not involved in voice AI. This is generally applicable to all AI systems, but particularly to voice AI. So what is MCP? It is the Model Context Protocol that recently came out from Anthropic. And I'm seeing a few people nod their heads, so some people in the room have heard of this. So I am very excited by this, and the reason is that it's a new standard. I think it's sort of like the API in a way for LLMs. What's the difference, right? And people are describing MCP as like the USB-C for AI. It's like almost like a cable that can transmit any sort of data. So what's the difference, right? In an API, you have versioning. You change one field in your API, then every developer that uses your API has to go and make a change to adapt to that new column, right? Because it's programmatic and they leave it out, it might throw an error. So usually what you do is batch up 1,000 changes at once and say, now we're on version 2 of the API. Okay, now everyone go and start using version 2. In the Model Context Protocol, and it's not really a competitor to APIs because it can use APIs, but LLMs are different. Imagine an API documentation with endpoints that had natural language describing what the endpoints are for. If that changes from 1 second to the next, the LLM doesn't care. To the LLM, it's just a tool. And it can fill out the fields on the fly. Or maybe it can ask the user for more information so that it can go and fill out the fields, right? I'll show a diagram in a moment. That hopefully makes it a bit more clear. But in voice AI, right, why I'm really excited is because these are the kinds of tools that let you control your computer. If you are working in enterprise, they're the kind of tools that let you interact with your client or your customer in a way that you can perform LLM queries against their system without exposing any underlying data. So I'm very excited about this. I think everyone should spend some time like learning and understanding MCP, and it has huge applications in voice AI. And this is it, right? So this is what we're used to, I think, up to this point, tool calling, which is your client, maybe Cursor or ChatGPT on the desktop or Claude Code or whatever it may be, your own chat application. And it calls a bunch of tools based on the API. If you're using like function calling with OpenAI, you sort of have to map that tool precisely to the API. And if the API increments to a new version, you have to go rebuild your whole tool. In the model context protocol world, all of the API like abstractions get moved to this model context protocol server. So even as the API is updated and versioned and things changed, from the perspective of the client, nothing's really changed. It's just like, this is a tool that I call to query a database. This is a tool that I call to post a message in the team's Slack channel. So even if the parameters of that tool change, the LLM doesn't care. It can adapt to any tool. It can fill out any field. It can query the user for information to be able to call that tool. And it can do that from 1 second to the next. So I know this could be a little complex and hard to understand, and it's something that even I'm getting into and trying to understand more deeply. But I think we should pay attention to this because if it gains wide adoption, it's essentially the API of LLMs, and everyone will need to know how to use it. So I won't spend any time here. I just wanted to compile a list of tools that I have found really good and useful in my own journey with voice AI. They're not all ones that I use at my company, but they're all ones that I've tried and evaluated myself. So some tools for like brainstorming and building like the front end of your project to life and moving into these 4, some of them like visual voice AI builders, some of them more tailored to developers, some tools for deployment, and some tools for getting visibility into what's actually happening in your calls. I will show a link that you can use to access these tools. But everyone, that is it from me. Thank you so much for having me here. Dan, thank you for having me back. This is an amazing community. I think Jacob is racing here from Denver, but thanks to Jacob Korniak too, my partner in crime for the last year and my main contact in Boulder. I hope you guys can go build some cool voice AI products. If you navigate to this link, it's just a link to these slides. So you can see the list of tools, and if you leave a comment, I'll reply, and I'm happy to connect and coach anyone through their voice AI project. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks very much, Trevor. And we're going to have all 3 speakers at the end for Q&A. So save your questions. We'll be doing Q&A with all the speakers. Okay, let me introduce our next speaker. Daniel Ritchie is a career technologist, and he's the founder of Brainwave Collective. He's going to explore real-time voice cloning and synthesis with hands-on examples. Modern voice AI technologies have become both powerful and approachable. This presentation will showcase how anyone can easily integrate these custom voices into their projects. And Brainwave Collective that he founded is a place where innovators transform emerging technologies into real-world success. He makes cutting-edge capabilities practical and accessible through Brainwave, fostering both individual and business innovation. It's a really cool model, and I encourage you to check out their events. So please join me in welcoming Daniel Ritchie.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. I am going to need another microphone, so I'll need this as well. We'll get this set up. I need 1 minute to stage all of this, and then we'll get going. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Excited to get going on this. For anyone who's concerned about robots taking over the world, the button's right over there. Yeah, I think we might just wing it here. I have a piece of paper that disappeared that has some interesting things on it, but we'll figure it out. All right, we all think we're unique, right? I actually made this up. Not entirely, though. I had a conversation with Claude, and the real number could be as high as 80 million. And the reason for that is we are really bad at remembering voices. Like internally, we kind of think we have an idea, especially people that we're comfortable with or familiar with. But even experts have a hard time distinguishing unique voices. So it's not unreasonable that 1 in every 10,000 people or so have a voice that to a stranger might be the same as yours. So what makes up a voice, right? We could talk about all the components of it. You know, you might have your own words to describe it was a gruff voice or it was a smooth voice, but it's hard to like hold that in your mind's eye, right? Like it's hard to, maybe you can hear it maybe a little bit, but having that be material is very difficult, unlike visual comparisons. Okay, if you don't know what this is Will Ferrell and the drummer from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, okay? And they're widely known to look very similar. So they went on Jimmy Kimmel and they did a drum off to raise money for charity. So wonderful, wonderful use of this. But we have 2 celebrities here that look alike. How many people sound alike? So just a couple months ago, David Attenborough had his voice used to give the news, effectively. Except it wasn't just news, it was propaganda. And it was not propaganda that he agreed with. So he took a very strong position, which is the quote that you just read. And it brings up a lot of interesting questions, right? His words were, this was theft. This was like stealing my identity, right? Now, it matters when you're David Attenborough and that's your job and that's what you do, but does it make a difference for the rest of us, right? If our voice is recreated, well, there's maybe a million other people around the planet that have voices that sound audibly similar to ours, right? So what is this idea of theft? Like, at what point are we taking something that actually belongs to somebody else that they own? If I sound on paper or on a recording on the tape, if I sound like a million other people, can I patent my voice? And can I prevent other people from using my voice? And the law today doesn't really have a good answer for this. And one of those reasons is because of those ambiguities, because of those uncertainties in the parts of the voice that are not easy to identify, right? You know what your friends sound like, you know what your family sounds like. By the way, my question about how many similar voices do we have? For close family members, it was 1 in 12,000 or something like that. So there's still another 10,000 people out there that even your mother might not be able to distinguish. I think that's probably a stretch, but. All right, so let's move away from voice for a little bit. And what better way to do that than some robots? I want to give you a quick demonstration so you have an idea of what you're looking at here. And then we'll turn it into something a little more interesting. All right. Can anyone here do a good Dan Murray impression? Anybody, maybe? I'm Dan Murray. You know, okay, I cloned his voice earlier. That actually happened, by the way. So what this is, this setup here, is not necessarily for puppetry. It's not necessarily for voice. It's actually for machine learning. So it's a pretty interesting project that allows really anyone to control a robot with one arm, and then you can record actions on this other arm, and then you can train it to do things. And this is interesting because it's open source, it's accessible, and anybody can do it. But that's not what we're here for, right? The graph, by the way, is just showing the position of each motor within the arm over time. Okay, I don't want to dive into this. I just want to give you kind of a taste of what you're looking at and what it's really for. So we did the most logical thing, and we put a puppet on it, because that's the next evolution of advanced technology. And if you're gonna have a puppet, you should make it talk, right? That should be part of the deal. This is where we find out if this works.
Hello there, everyone. Quite a crowd. Are we all here for Dan Murray's RMAIIG meetup? It's inspiring, isn't it? How Dan brings people together like this. As a puppet, I find these gatherings extra special. Never any joint pain after a good chat, you see. Looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say, especially with such good company.
Thanks, Dan. So what goes into a voice clone? All right, I want you to be not just entertained, but informed. I want you to understand this. I want you to walk away with the ability to make sense of this world of voice, which you're gonna obviously hear a lot about in the coming months with all these interesting projects that are happening. The first thing that you need is the actual recording of the voice. This is a real person speaking, okay? Once you have that actual recording of a voice, you can generate a synthetic voice model from that content. And once you have that model, you can then make it speak anything that you want it to speak. So in this case, we heard Dan Murray, who generously recorded his voice earlier, speaking about this audience tonight, the people that we have here. But I could have made him say anything that I wanted to, which I won't, because that's part of my terms and conditions is we will only use voice recordings and the models for this event tonight. We'll delete them. That's what my paper is I'm looking for. But understand that a voice clone isn't just as simple as AI that can speak. There is a real human behind it, potentially. There is a model that can then be used to do a lot of different things with, and then there's the content that comes out of it, okay? So the spoken word generated by the model. And we talked earlier about what is a voice, okay? Now, we could describe all these details. Some of us have a better idea than others about what these things are, but again, it's kind of hard to get your head around. But for an AI, you don't necessarily have to tell the system these specific aspects. This is not Dan Murray's voice, but this could be Dan Murray's. This is a embedding for a single person's voice. So this is how much information I need to create the Dan Murray or anybody else. Okay, there's 200 points. Now, you and I could think, well, it sounds like a very feminine voice, or it sounds like a very masculine voice. But somewhere in here, one of those numbers points in that direction of femininity or masculinity. Okay, so all these things get captured in a way that is kind of beyond humans, right? It's like not something that we have to write down or describe. We just allow the model to capture these things. So a system that's capable of capturing this information quickly can then reproduce that information quickly as well. So once you have the voice recording, once you have those details, you run it through a machine that can then create a model that is capable of recreating voice. Who's ready to have some fun? We got a big audience. There's got to be somebody here who wants to give this thing a try. Come on up. All right, so what's making this challenging, let me pull up the text because I can get it on my computer. Okay. And I'll just have you read it. So one of the important parts about voice, I think, is informed consent and an understanding about things. So we talked about three things. Your actual voice recording. I'm going to delete that after this, okay? Then we talked about the synthetic model that's capable of reproducing your voice. I'm going to delete that also, okay? The only reason I might use either of those things is if we have some weird thing that happens, there's some technical problem or something like that, then we might go back and revisit it and try to understand what went wrong, okay? That's just to learn from it, and only in those exceptional circumstances, okay? The third piece, the generated content that comes out of this, the words that get spoken, those I'll keep. Because we'll be able to review those and understand there's a photograph being taken here as well of the audience, and it's analyzing the content of that photograph And if it says something that we really didn't expect, we need to understand why. So we'll go back and take a look at that. Okay, so those are the 3 pieces, and that's how it's gonna work. You can stop at any time. We aren't compensating anyone for this. And if anybody takes some interesting videos, we might post them on social media or something like that. Okay, all right, we got the thumbs up. That's what we're here for, folks. All right, so with that said, I need 1 minute. I'm gonna pull up some text that we'll have you read, and it'll take 20 seconds. And just bear with us for 1 minute here.
Okay. We're all
if you
set.
could hold this, please.
Sure. I know that I could get a little ribald. Although while I'm here, I was late on the announcements. So there is something very exciting happening on April 23rd in Boulder. There's already an event called the New Venture Challenge, and that is where CU is going to award $320,000 to students who've been competing, and that will be at the Boulder Theater. But I'm doing programming from 12 to 4, and I'm hosting 10 dinners of 10 people. So all of you wonderful, big, rich companies who would like to sponsor a group of 10, come see me after. And we want to pair students and founders to build relationship. That is the goal.
Fantastic, come check that out.
There we go, I entertained them.
Well, it's a win-win, you know? We like filling the air that way. If you could just step over this, please. Yes. All right, so here's what we'll have you do. It'll just be this text right here. Yep. And I'll have you, I'm gonna set this down here. So what that'll be perfect. So what we're gonna have you do is we're gonna have you get kind of close to this. Not directly onto it, it'll be off to the side a little bit. I'll position it, and then when I say go, just read that text. Just this paragraph. So get closer. Yeah, and try to keep not quite that close, but there we go, right there. That's good. And all right, ready?
Yep. Can
Go.
you bring this over? I sat by the lake.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, wait.
Wait, we jumped the gun here. I'm sorry. Technical, you know, these things. I thought a live demo wasn't good enough. We had to have hardware included also. All right. All right.
Is my positioning good?
Positioning is good, and go.
I sat by the lake yesterday watching the clouds drift overhead. The water sparkled in the sun while the kids played along the shore. It felt peaceful just being there, feeling the breeze and listening to the birds in the trees nearby. These quiet moments always remind me how beautiful simple things can be.
All right, thank you. We need willing participants for these things, so we really appreciate your stepping up and being involved. All right, now we get to find out if it works. So it's taking a photograph, it's understanding the content of that photograph, and then she will have something to say.
Well, hello there, folks. Are we all here for the Dan Murray RMAIIG meetup? I'm quite excited, as Dan is a real community builder, isn't he? Being a puppet, I find him often asked about puppet advantages, and you know, never worrying about dehydration during Flatiron's hikes is pretty fantastic. I hope everyone is having a good day.
A Flatiron's hike, how about that? Thank you.
Hearing your voice back.
You usually, one hates that.
It was fine. I have a fine voice.
You do have a fine voice. Thank you. All right, so let's see. How are we doing on time? Oh, we got plenty of time. This is great. How fun, right? So again, those 200 details, those numbers, right? So what is a voice? It's a bunch of numbers, right? The system has no idea who she is, what her background is, why she sounds the way that she does. We just captured that, okay? We can have some fun with this. We have enough time. Does anybody else want to try? Oh, all right, here we go. Hold on, we have a parent here? Hold on. We good? All right. What's your name, sir? Nalin? Nalin. Nice to meet you, Nalin. I'm Daniel. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna have you speak a paragraph of text, and then we're gonna put it into the robot, okay? And here, if you come up here, you'll have to speak into this. So you'll be about this distance apart. So I'll take a step closer, and I'll position this. So stay in that position, and when we say go, we're gonna read this. All right, you ready to go? Mm-hmm. Okay, go.
I sat by the lake yesterday, watching the clouds drift overhead. The water sparkled in the sun while kids played along the shore. I felt peaceful just being there, feeling the breeze and listening to the birds in the trees. These quiet moments always remind me of how beautiful simple things can be.
All right, thank you, Nayland. Well done, well done. All right, so let's see what Nayland has to say. You've aged a bit, it looks like.
Well, hello there, friends. Is this the RMAIIG meetup I've heard so much about? I'm here to learn from Dan Murray about building a great community, but also to show off my snazzy red bow tie that complements Colorado's state flower, the columbine. I've also noticed how delightfully light I feel these days. No aching joints after those mountain adventures, unlike you non-puppets. Good to meet you all, and let's have a wonderfully productive meeting.
All right, Nayland. Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you, thank you. All right, so now that we understand how all this works and we understand that it's just a bunch of numbers, it's gonna sound like whatever information we give it. Does anybody just wanna make some weird sounds and see what happens? Anybody? Oh, come on down, all right. We're just gonna get creative, you know? Because it doesn't know that you're speaking words or not speaking words. All it knows is that it's capturing things and coming up with all those numbers. And it's gonna use those numbers to convert whatever it thinks into text, okay? So I'm gonna give you creative license. You can say real words, you can make things up, you could read the text if you just wanna do that. It's totally up to you.
I'll read the text.
You'll read the text, all right, all right. Not that creative, that's okay. It's still fun to hear anyways. All right, here we go. So you'll just read this paragraph right here, and you'll have to get kind of close. There, that'll be perfect. Just stay like that. I'll move it a little away. A little bit closer. Just like that. That'll be perfect. And go.
I sat by the lake yesterday, watching the clouds drift overhead. The water sparkled in the sun while kids played along the shore. It felt peaceful just being there, feeling the breeze and listening to the birds and the trees nearby. These quiet moments always remind me how beautiful simple things can be.
All right. And what's your name?
Brody.
Brody. Thank you, Brody. All right, Brody. Let's see what Brody has to say. Oh, wait, Brody's still cloning over here. All right, now we're good. Hopefully there's not like a mean version of this or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, hello there, friends. Doesn't this room have an awful lot of lights? I'm just tickled to be here, you know, at this gathering. It's RMAIIG, isn't it, led by Dan Murray? I hear he's quite the community builder. You know, one advantage to being a puppet in Colorado is that my joints never ache after mountain adventures. So glad to be here chatting with all of you.
Let's give it up for Brody. Thanks, man. Awesome. All right, so we're definitely out of time. So thank you, everyone, for participating in this. You know, we just have to have some fun sometimes. So hopefully you have an idea of everything that goes into this. Let me wrap this up quickly. The first thing to understand is I didn't make up a voice model that does this. I just borrowed it from someone else that had figured it out. This is Cartesia just raised a big Series A. That's the model that we're using for the cloning and the text-to-speech as well. We use the same system for both of those things. I'll explain that in a second. The other thing I want to remind you of is when you have access to all these incredibly powerful things, you can make amazing things with it, but what you do with it is up to you. So we all get to decide how we want to do these things. I did not clone David Attenborough's voice tonight, not because I didn't think he would mind. I thought it would be just fine if we did that, because he's not a puppet and there wouldn't be any confusion about that. but out of respect for him, I decided we wouldn't do that. His 98th birthday is coming up in a couple months. And this is it. So here's all the pieces that we have. Most of this project is totally open source. You can 3D print these arms. You can use the software to control the robots. And even some rudimentary voice control is open source that we open source as well. And if you have any questions, send me an email, daniel@brainwavecollective.ai. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Daniel. That was awesome. Thanks. Okay, let me introduce our third speaker, Christian Robbins. He's co-founder and chief creative officer of $11 Bill. Tonight, he's going to explore how voice AI is transforming real-world post-production workflows. Voice AI is becoming an essential tool in modern media production, from voice cloning to automated dialogue replacement, all the way to AI-generated temp tracks and localization. This presentation will showcase how these technologies enhance storytelling and streamline creative processes. We're going to get an inside look at how these tools are used daily in professional environments where the blend of human creativity and AI leads to faster, more flexible, and more innovative results. Christian's co-founder and chief creative officer of $11 Bill, as I mentioned. He's a veteran post-production creative with over 25 years of experience in visual effects, editorial, and sound design. He's worked on global campaigns, TV commercials, and high-profile projects. Please join me in welcoming Christian Robbins.
All right, what's up, everybody? How we doing? This is a nice turnout. I'm going to listen to Trevor for a second and think about my mom and dad. I just want to take a quick picture of all of you. Like, this is an amazing turnout that you guys have here. And this is my first time at one of these events. I've heard about you guys. I followed you here and there, but I was thrilled that Dan invited me to talk a little bit about post-production up here. So Dan, Rich, Anna, wherever you went, thank you so much for everything tonight. And Trevor, Daniel, this is really great stuff. Like, this is really unique because I'm at the receiving end of a lot of this tech because of my industry. So post-production, well, let me back up just a second. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Chris, and I'm Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of $11 Bill. We're a post-production studio. We have offices in Boulder, Chicago, Raleigh. We've been around for 25 years. I've won some shiny awards, and I got a bad habit of jumping and early adopting tech. So AI is right up my alley. It's my job just to curate what works and what doesn't, cut through the BS, and help creatives actually use these tools. So this is not really a technical talk I'll be giving. It's more about me showing you some real-world application of AI voice in action. So the reason why I think this is such a creative game changer for us, it just speeds up the entire creative process so much. Refining scripts, identifying timing, pacing, making iterations faster and faster, making better decisions, right? And it unlocks a lot of new creative possibilities. Like, you can experiment, right? Like, you can try alternative reads, you can, emotions, styles, like, it lets you experiment in storytelling and brand voice. So it's not, AI voice isn't just filling gaps, it's expanding entire creative workflows. And it adds access to people that don't normally have access to high quality voices. Smaller teams, smaller budgets have just all the playing field has been leveled completely for anybody. And it enhances collaboration overall. So, let's take a look at how this works in my world. So just a little backstory. Post-production is everything that happens after the shoot, right? It's editorial, it's motion graphics, it's audio, it's delivery, it's editorial, it's everything, right? That happens after the shoot. So this is the traditional post-production workflow, and it's rigid, and it goes in a specific order, and it's really annoying because you can't move on until everything else is done. So the problems are, it's expensive to fix things, right? Like, re-recording the voiceover at the end is a huge cost and an amazing time suck. So it limits flexibility, right? By the time the VO recorded, the script is locked. Like there is no creative content happening after that. So let me show you the big shift. We're not really like waiting on steps anymore. It's more of this circular feedback loop, right? So AIVO lets us test these ideas instantly. It's awesome. We can rewrite the script on the fly with the client in. We can try a different tone. We can do totally alternate reads. We can change the timing before we ever call in a voice actor, right? And all of this can happen in parallel, like editing, script writing, audio, graphics. This all circulates under this new kind of workflow. And the feedback loop is it's so much faster than it used to be. The clients hear the AI voice in context, allows for earlier feedback. They're more familiar with it. And the client's able to sign off on a, nearly final version of it. So yeah, AI voice is a big part of us being able to do this. So in fact, it's kind of our secret weapon, honestly. Post-production, it's not for everybody. It's fast-paced, it's high pressure, deadlines are tight, clients are crazy, just like any industry really. But anything that makes revisions faster is a total win for us. So again, I feel like it's not only speeding up workflows, it's adding a lot of creative flexibility. And it's assisting human voice talent, right? Like think about if we're able to take a model of a VO talent that has allowed us to do that and try all these things out and then give them a blueprint to work from for the final reads, that saves everybody time and money. But it's beyond just efficiency, really. It's pretty damn fun. And, we have a good time with it. So I'm getting past these slides. We'll have more fun in a minute here. But this is how we're actually using it here. AI scratch reads we're using in 90% of our edits. So we do TV commercials, documentaries, long format, event, whatever, name it. If it's video, we do it. And 90% of that stuff is using Scratch VO AI, like today. But this is how we're pragmatically using it. So, I'll show you a few examples of some things that we've done, like this VO talent model, some work we did with Dave & Buster's, and then some fun like music and lyric stuff. So again, it's not about replacing voice actors with all these models that we're talking about here. We're just making sure their time is spent better. Recording final takes, not fixing bad scripts, right? So the more of that crap we get out of the way, the more creativity and more time we have to experiment. And that's really part of the creative process that I love that voice AI really helps out with. So, as we talked about tonight, 11 Labs, Artlist, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. These are my two favorites right now because 11 Labs, I feel like, is really leading the synthesized voiceover game. We're regularly asked by clients to use it. You can prompt a voice based on client direction. So you might get a brief that says, want it to sound like Richard Attenborough, except 30 years younger. So I can prompt that and it'll create a voice model for me to choose from. And then you can use it. You can give it a script. So an Artlist, which is normally just, stock music place, has really got into the AI voiceover game. And there's some of the best sounding stuff right now. They add nuance and pauses and breaths and just all the natural things you expect.
The thing about fun is just when you thought you'd seen it all, Dave & Buster's makes more to see. More ways to compete with your family, more ways to eat, drink, and play with your friends, and more ways to win. Even when your team can't help but lose. More fun. So
you kind of get it. Like there's all this nice nuance and pause and emotion and for a scratch read, that's pretty good, right? And 11 Labs is super slick because, I made a custom model of my voice this morning. Took 10 minutes. There's, I think, like 3 different options to do it. You can do a real-time one, like you just saw. You can do one where you give it a few different readings of 30 seconds readings of you talking into a mic, or you can do like a half-hour version, which ain't nobody got time for that. But, so I did one of myself. And, we can make it say whatever we want.
Hey, Rocky Mountain AI Interest Group. This is Christian Robbins' text-to-speech model. This only took 10 minutes to make, but it sounds pretty damn good to me.
So it's not bad, like that was morning Chris before coffee and stuff. So it's a little more raspy and wonderful, but like that's fun. But like, how do we use this in a practical setting, right? So one of our clients is a large nameless pizza brand that you've probably eaten. They have one voiceover for all of their campaigns. That's it. And the problem is we move fast, right? There's like 50 deliverables. They're all different types of scripts. The scripts work in theory. You lay them against picture, they're way too long. So what do? Real-time feedback's coming in. The writers behind us making changes. So they made a AI voiceover model of their talent for scratch purposes, which is just genius because then you can iterate way faster, right? Like you have all these, you got the voice, you put it against picture. Hey, it works, it doesn't work, right? And there's still like some, finagling you got to do to it. I mean, obviously some people have used 11 Labs and other video synthesis models. Like sometimes you got to do things in all caps or make it say it like 5 times in a row. Like it's kind of an effort still, but the fact that we can pull this off in a post-production real world setting is great. So, there's full consent from the voiceover talent to do this. So, they probably got paid pretty well to do something like that. But again, it's not about replacing talent. It was about keeping the team in creative flow and not having to worry about these things. Like, oh, we got to get her back in the booth. Oh, we can't work until we have a new script, right? Like these are time sucks that all these little solutions solve. So, let me show you what that sounds like. And I just a little excerpt from it to try to keep a little bit of anonymity going.
What about our customizers? Turning our pizza into your masterpiece. Good news. Right now, get any pizza on any crust with any toppings for $9.99 each online.
Okay, so that is an early rough cut, right? Easy graphics, just a sense of pacing. And then here was a little excerpt from the final.
Those of you who turn our pizza into your masterpiece.
This is a perfect pizza.
Good news. Right now, get a pizza on any crust with any toppings for $9.99 each online.
So even if you're not in post-production, this is the takeaway. So AI lets you keep, especially the voice AI, it lets you keep having momentum. And whether it's VO, design, copywriting, the faster you can iterate and experiment, the more time you have to be creative. So we love these tools so much. And then anybody, go to David Buster's and drop like $250 for no reason with your kids? I have, I don't know, but good thing I like my daughters. But we did some test spots for them. And it was interesting because they needed a fast way to explore creative directions. People do test spots. They market it with people. They send it off to test market groups and see what happens. But that process takes a lot of time. It's a big upfront cost. So we do what we can to try to expedite that process. So, we use Midjourney and Runway to make some visuals and do some cool stuff here, but this isn't a generative, image talk. This is a AI talk. But the problem was, and I did not see this coming, is that these looked too good. So instead, what we did is ended up taking these, having a real storyboard artist trace them, and then we took them back and animated them and added AI voice to it. So they could understand like what that sounds and looks like to a test crowd. So here, I'll just play this for you here.
The thing about fun is just when you thought you'd seen it all, Dave & Buster's makes more to see. More ways to compete with your family. More ways to eat, drink, and play with your friends. And more ways to win. Even when your team can't help but lose. More fun, more togetherness. All built around you and your crew. Oh, and the arcade? We're way ahead of you there. Everything you love about Dave & Buster's, and everything you will love about Dave & Buster's.
So test spots are really basic, right? They show them to a crowd. They're like, I like that idea. Cool. We're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on that, right? But we knocked these things out in, there was 4 spots with rounds and rounds and rounds of client feedback. This was done in a week. And something like that normally takes 3 to 4 weeks, maybe a month, maybe longer if nobody can make up their mind. But the fact that we were able to like say, this is what it sounds like with a female voiceover, this is what it sounds like with a male actor. Like we gave them all these options, they picked the best one, and then they rolled with it. And these are on TV, these are actually on TV now. So they look pretty close to the boards I showed you earlier. But, and then like something I want to talk about that I think gets overlooked is music, right? Like Suno, Udio are awesome. It's so fun to play with these things, right? And they have singers and talent and lyrics. And it's evolving so fast. Like the quality is so good. And the thing is, it's commercially viable music now. Like I can download splits and mixes and the voice separated from the drums. I can send that off to our audio house. They can mix that and they're like, what in the hell is going on? And it's great. So, like I said earlier, I got 2 daughters and they're just making their own music to listen to, which is just super cool. And these are my 2 favorite ones. Udio I like a lot because you can get really granular with it over the lyrics and the structure of the music you generate. And then Suno is so fast. Like you make a track, it takes you like 30 seconds. And it sounds really, really, really good. So, but again, it's not about just making music, it's about the voices in the song. So right before the presentation, I made back up for a second. If you know me, I'm a late 90s gangster rap aficionado. Like I love it. And West Coast. And I made a song in Suno right before the presentation in that style. And, about being nervous to talk to you all today and hoping my computer didn't crash or anything. But I'm going to play it for you. But what I want you to listen is to the fidelity of the voice and the flow of it, right? Like, and I didn't write these lyrics. I just prompted it to make a 90s West Coast gangster rap about me being nervous to speak to you all tonight. And hoping my demos didn't crash.
Rocky Mountain A, I can breathe. I'm gonna spit it. 1, 2, 1 to the 2 to the 3, and it goes. Ho Silver. Oh, man. Ain't messing. This is a confession. I'm stressed in a session. Cartoon sweat lines coming right out of my face. Those nerds out in them Rockies that made a big mistake. Been up in that plane since we played the Vikings.
So I'm not going to bore you with the whole thing, but like, damn, that sounds pretty good, right? Like that's fun stuff. So go ahead and play with that. But like, how do we use that in a real world setting in post production? We have these clients that come in. They're my favorites. They do the weirdest crap, and we have so much fun with them. And they try the strangest things. And I've always been trying to push AI stuff, and it's just always on the cusp of being good. But we made some holiday themed ocean spray social things, and one of them was, let's make, maybe we can get like an orchestra or like a choir, like an opera, singing the tagline to the spot. And we experimented and came up with a few different things, and I'll just play this one for you here. And the client almost bought it. Like, it was so close. It was so close. But that was like a year ago, right? And can you imagine that leap or what you can make today based on that? And they saw it and they were like so close. They're like, I don't know what's going on with that yet. But it's just unlocking all this massive creative potential, right? And then, what happens when it becomes indistinguishable from human voice, right? Like, what do we do? So I think there's something here that I refer to as like the deep face future paradox, right? It's how do we evolve with it? As it becomes indistinguishable from human voices, it unlocks a lot of potential, but it challenges how we define that authenticity, right? The trust, right? Like, we're storytelling. Like, to your point earlier about Attenborough and like him stealing his voice, like that'll get you in a lot of trouble. Like, we're trying to make a company based on using these tools. You have to know what you can and can't do. So there's a big ethical consideration about it. So, like, do we fear what's going to happen, or do we harness it responsibly, right? Keeping these tools to help us keep authenticity in storytelling, how do we start signaling like what's AI and what's human? And the creative control versus ethical responsibility is a really important point to think about. How do we ensure it's a tool for enhancing creativity and not replacing it? And, I think the real opportunity isn't just these AI tools versus humans, it's them working together. But what you're able to achieve when you're combining these tools is absolutely incredible. So, and as you've seen tonight, like AI voice is evolving whether we want it to or not, right? And it's not the question of like, will it replace us? It's how do we use it to tell better stories, right? How do we get these little, BS time sucks out of the way to try to experiment more? And these are really great tools in order to use it. And it's just a pragmatic approach, right? One little thing with one other little thing with one other little thing, and you start stacking these solutions on top of each other, you can achieve some really amazing results. So, I think that's really the thing to think about, after we're talking here today. But, here's a little like runway, cool, talent that I made earlier. And, we just make it say whatever we want.
Hey, Rocky Mountain AI Interest Group. It's great to have the chance to talk to you about AI voice today. This is pretty neat stuff.
So, it's lifting a major pain point in our industry. It's transforming post-production from this rigid, linear process and to this like dynamic sphere of creativity, right? So we have more creative freedom, we experiment more, we push ideas further because we have more time, right? We don't have to say no anymore. And we just want to be in the driver's seat of this stuff. I think that's the most important part. And it's not about replacing people. It's about expanding what's actually possible with our creativity. So, so that's it. So, thanks for listening to me ramble. And, there's all my stuff. So if you want to email me or link me in or like look at pictures of my dog and kids and random like AI late night things that I've done, feel free. If you want to dork out about this stuff or like just figure out like, what did you do? What are you doing now? I love talking to everybody. So, I'd love to have the chance to meet with you all. So appreciate you all and your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christian. I'll ask all three speakers to come up and we will start the Q&A. Please wait till you get a microphone to ask a question. So you guys can come right here. Borrow that for a sec. Okay, I'm going to kick it off to the first question to Trevor, and that is, you mentioned that sometimes the callers get frustrated when they're calling. Are you using like a Hume voice analyzer where you can detect the emotion and detect frustration and kick them out to a real human? Anything like that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So before I answer that, I do want to just give some props to Daniel. I'm not sure how he pulled this together. So I think there's like a 3D printed robot arm, a puppet, a voice AI. I left giving demos to braver men tonight, and I think it turned out very well. So major props, Daniel. Amazing. That's crazy. So the question is, how do we figure out in real time if a human's getting frustrated with the AI? So for us, right, we've tried some third-party tools, haven't had much success. The most success we got was with OpenAI large language models. So after a while, there's like a real-time model, which is maybe GPT-4o, let's say, and that agent is conducting the call, and it's like recording the answers, and it's doing as best as it can. They're sort of like pretty good but very fast models, both for the LLM layer and for the speech-to-text layer. And then there's like some more analysis you can do like a few seconds later that maybe use a reasoning model or like a better speech-to-text model. So that's what we do. We like analyze the calls at certain points with reasoning models.
Cool, thank you. So first question, I'll go to Bob here.
Hey, thanks, guys. This is great, really exciting, interesting demos. This is for Trevor again. Just about the, you said that your models are something that you mentioned for your parents, something that your parents would that they would understand or that they would use. I'm curious why you make that distinction, because I mean, voicemail should be for everybody, right? I'm just as frustrated on voice calls as any parent, but I mean, seriously, is there a distinction, and are you really, bifurcating or differentiating, different kinds of audiences, or is it really for everybody?
Yeah, so this is a golden rule that came out of our company specifically, because our company is a healthcare brokerage that mainly works with retirees that are trying to enroll in Medicare. So most of our clients are about to turn 65 or over 65. And it's really long before Voice AI, the CEO of my company said Medicare is actually pretty scammy and really bad sometimes. So he said, I want to build a healthcare brokerage that I would want my parents to use. So people were trying to scam his parents essentially. So that philosophy just came over to our Voice AI. These are mostly older folks that call us. So before we start any project, we try to think about, how can we design this in a way that I would want my mom and dad to talk to this, not get really frustrated or angry at it, but actually make it a good experience for them, that they'd want to stay on the phone the whole time.
Okay, Mark, with the next question in the back here.
So this is a question for the last presentation. A year ago, the Actors Guild signed a thing that they would not use AI to write scripts and all that stuff. And to me, when I saw that, it's a 3-year contract. When I saw that, they're just kicking the inevitable down the road, so to speak. And so they decided to stay in the Stone Age versus the Space Age. And do you think, because they're going to stay in the Stone Age, that the industry itself will pass them by and just leave them behind? Because what I see tonight is a time saver, a cost saver, and I wouldn't want to be an actor or an actress right now if I could do voiceovers. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
I mean, there's a really big opportunity right now for people that are experienced in this industry, that have decades of experience, that I think is getting overlooked. I feel like it's, slightly like a fear of the tool, but it needs people with experience to curate it, right? So I equate it to, when film went to video, that change in tech didn't really necessarily change cinematographers, right? Or when it went from video to DV and Final Cut came out, and everybody was like, oh, the college kids are going to take our jobs. They did, basically. And with, HD, 4K, and all of these other, AI tools that are coming out that you can implement in your workflow, you really do have to keep up on it. You really do. But I think the problem is people get overwhelmed with the amount of tools that they just can't hone in. And what I try to do is stay in my lane and find tools and solutions that work for me. And if anybody can grasp that concept, it's a lot easier and it's a lot less difficult to be overwhelmed by all of this. So, there are creatives that, are suddenly now exposed to all these tools that can make, production movie level stuff, right? I'm not going to say, SAG is, a bad influence on creativity by any means. That's a protection unit, but protection has to evolve as well.
So one more quick question for Christian. When you use 11 Labs and you're prompting it, does it ever give you sort of a copyright pushback the way that some of the text large language models do, where you say, I want an image of this or I want this, and it sort of says that's a violation? Does it ever push back?
I've never had that.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I've had it mispronounce a lot of names, brand names in really terrible ways, but I've never had anything like that. Yeah.
Okay, next question back here.
Hi, my name's Melissa. This is my first AI meetup, and all three of you did an amazing job, so thank you. Learned a lot of new stuff. My question is for Trevor. Wanted to understand a little more about the challenges and how you handled memory. Are you, what are the best practices there? Are you using third party to store the data? And are there best practices in terms of keeping historical context on a conversation? Are you, I'm assuming, creating a summary of that after and then storing summaries and then retrieving them?
Yeah, so This is a fantastic question, and one I will try to avoid waxing on about, because we have tried many different things to get memory to work. I will say, right, I think voice AI is so early that it's almost impossible. Maybe now in like the last couple of months, some of the off-the-shelf tools are becoming really good. But it's been extremely difficult to find anything that just works, right? So you end up kind of going back to the fundamentals and leveraging just embeddings or AI to store the memory. I think the big trend that I've noticed is 6 months ago, we had to do RAG for everything. And of course, we're like summarizing all of the calls. We've tried breaking the call into chunks and summarizing each one and sort of doing retrieval that way. Nothing was ever perfect. In the past couple of months, I think it was around like 03 mini high introduction, we've gotten to a point where you can essentially transcribe like an entire call history and like dump it into the whole thing into the LLM and ask it to pick out a single data point, and it does that consistently every single time. So what I would count on in the future, not that summaries are bad for memory, but I would count on the fact that the fundamental models are just going to get better and better, hopefully cheaper and cheaper too, so it's not like cost prohibitive, but you can sort of rely on the foundational models for your memory as much as possible. It's my experience. Some of these guys might have a different one.
Just a reminder, when Trevor says RAG, that stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. Okay, the next question is for Daniel Ritchie. Who has a question for Daniel Ritchie?
Hi, Daniel. When you were talking about defining the voice, you talked about things like pitch, but so much about people speaking is when they pause, if they use, slang, things like that. How does that get figured into those 200 variables that you were showing?
So the 200 variables are basically an abstract representation of the sounds that come out of your mouth, the pitch, the tone, those aspects. Behind that, the company is Cartesia. Behind that, Cartesia has a really powerful model for taking those sounds and turning them into voice that have all those other pieces included in them. So there's magic behind that that's happening, but the part of that that's you is only those 200.
Okay, next question is over here. And then we're going to take a question from a student. If any student has a question, you go next.
Thank you. This is for all of you, really. We've been concentrating on the 200 points of data, and I loved your question about, the characteristics of the conversation and the language that they use, the slang, some of them, and all, all the words end in up. So we're able to capture all that, but the delivery is what's funny. Like you can have Will Ferrell's voice say anything you want, but it's Will Ferrell who knows how to use that voice to be entertaining. Do you see a time when they're going to be able to pump enough Will Ferrell videos in and be able to start generating new content with him saying funny contemporary things?
Yes.
Yeah. And it'll be in his style.
So it's been really hard to find a good voice. I found one that I like so much, and I started running it on calls, and I probably tested it myself on like 500 calls, and everything was fine. And then someone was like, I called it, and the voice was kind of weird. And I started using some analysis to find the calls where the voice was like a little weird. And then it's talking like normal, and it's like, do you have Medicare Parts A and B?
No.
Well, I don't know why it does the little sound, but I think everything is getting better quickly. I think it's like we're so early into this, and it's so amazing already. So I think the trend, I agree with Daniel. I think the answer is yes.
Creating content, I think humor is probably the most difficult thing because it is so subjective. And to get the proper pacing to tell a joke and to break it down into like actual mathematics is extraordinarily difficult, right? the biggest thing I fight with when we're trying to use some of these Scratch VO tools are that exact problem. Like I need them to accent a certain word or like draw it out, to make the point, give it a beat, things like that. Like I find myself taking these VOs and I make a VO out of it from probably like 30 or 40 different edits to try to get the exact little pieces that I need. There are tools out there, Murph is one of them, that does emphasis and lets you highlight things and, turn up the end of the sentence, right? So the fact that those are tools that are out now, you see how exponential the curve is with, the way things are coming out these days. So it's not a matter of a year, it's a matter of months at this point, I think.
Totally agree, Christian, on humor. Just ask an LLM to say something funny or make this funny, or it's terrible, right? It's
awful.
Just disaster. Okay, any students have questions? Is there a student with a question? Okay, here we go.
I think first of all, thank you for the host and speakers for this insightful session. I had a question for Daniel. So my question was like, if a model is trained on my voice in English language, as you did in the presentation, so will it be able to replicate the same voice in multiple languages, or do we need to train the model for each specific language?
So this particular company has a localization option that they just released. There are multiple English dialects, American, British, Australian, and then there's also the ability to translate into another language entirely. I've done this with some Indians for Hindu, and the translation is good, but it's better if you do it in the native language. Someone else wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but it distorts it when you do the different language.
Okay, next question here.
Hey guys, thank you very much for the wonderful and super awesome demo here. One question for Daniel and one question for Trevor. So Daniel, when you said, again, going back to the 200-dimensional vector embedding, that was just for one syllable, right? That can't be for
That's it.
your
That's
entire
you.
speech.
That's you. So any individual, so every single person that came up and demoed will generate a 200 dimension embedding. And that is enough, that's the fingerprint, if you will, for whether it's a man or a woman, whether it's cheerful, whether it's curious and questioning at the end. Those aspects are captured in just those 200 points.
Okay. Thank you. And then Trevor, going back to the memory, I know that there was a question about memory before, but what I was thinking, just kind of clarifying exactly how that works is, it sounds like you guys do a text, speech to text, right? So then to transcribe it, so then, how when you're doing the large language models, when you do just the text, you basically save all the prompts and the response, and then in the subsequent API call that you just, you grab everything, you collate everything together and send it, right? So that's kind of part of how memory is done for text to, just the text part. So is that what you're doing, or you're doing something else?
Yeah, thanks for revisiting. I think, and thanks for giving me the chance to explain it better too. So I think there are much more memory-intensive applications than us that have different needs. For us, right, if somebody calls for purpose A and they later call for purpose B, we probably don't need to remember the entire conversation history of call A and call B. What we really needed to do was extract structured data from call A, their name, their zip code, their doctor, their prescriptions, and then be able to pull that back into call B. So when I talk about putting the whole thing in a conversational model, really what we're doing, or in the large language model, we're sort of using that step to extract structured data at the end of the call. And then that's what we might feed in to another call and call it, I guess, memory.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. And then a final question for all of you guys is, how banks, they do your voice as your signature? Should they be afraid? What can they do there?
I got into an argument not an argument. I didn't believe the statement that someone made about 6 weeks ago, and I was having a conversation about this. And they're pretty heavily involved in the space and around deep fake detection. So how do you prove that you're you in this? And the statement that was made, which I had a hard time believing, was that the ability to have that be a unique signature will be broken by the end of this year, is the expectation. That's one person's opinion. That seems really aggressive to me, but they were 100% confident that it was going to happen. So I've seen enough rapid pace in the recent times that I can't discount that. So that's what I think.
So when my son goes to college in a year and a half and calls from Mexico on a last-minute trip that we didn't know about and needs us to wire money, what do we do?
Do you love your son?
Next question right here.
This is kind of the flip side of what you guys are doing, but also dependent on it. I'm wondering how much work is and how close we are to AI not necessarily being able to put out human voices, but to recognize the user that it's speaking with and what state of mind the user's in, what kind of a person it is, and be able to adjust their own language to mirror that person and speak with it in a way that doesn't bug the shit out of the person, basically. To mimic it, or you guys know what I'm saying.
I'm gonna give a very brief response and then pass off to the other speakers. But starting with like the tricky, sneaky things that we do, I guess, right? So now, like, it's pretty bad at getting the name right. So you're like, for Trevor, it's terrible. Like it never, it'll be like, what's your name? I'm like, Trevor. Or like, thank you, Travis. Every single time, right? And so the sneaky thing I do now is like look up everyone's caller ID. If the name is there, then I use it to correct the spelling, and now it says it right every time. So we're kind of like pulling tricks right now. I think that will just like get better fundamentally. And then like the regional dialects thing is something we've talked about. We haven't like implemented that yet, but I think that is true. Like someone calls from the South, maybe you like do a Southern dialect where we talk about it, not something that we've done yet, but curious to hear what you think, Daniel.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this idea of translation, and not necessarily one language to another, but emotional state, or think about the nuanced misunderstandings that we have during conversations. And if we could understand that nuance, it might be more helpful. I learned about an app at Denver Startup Week last year, actually. This is someone that we work with. And she's putting together an app for mental health and understanding like if someone's drifting into an unhealthy state. And then it's an indicator for them to say, hey, I noticed a change in your voice or something like that. So she's doing voice analysis for that. I think there's other interesting products that we've seen and heard about related to the nuance that's hard for an individual to pick up themselves. And the same way that these LLMs give us access to this broad amount of information, I think voice understanding will give us access to a depth of understanding that we don't currently have the ability to tap into.
I mean, I don't have a technical explanation, obviously. I'm more on the receiving end of a lot of this, but, as a user trying to create content, I feel like there are better understandings of my nuance and my tone in text, right? Like if I'm asking ChatGPT to do something, right, it will respond to me in a certain way, in the similar way that I'm prompting visuals, and in like Runway and Midjourney. Like there's a very similar context there. There's no reason that can't get translated to, okay, you sound agitated and your pitch went up as soon as you got on this, and now I'm going to respond to you like this. Right? Like I would be surprised if something out there doesn't exist currently for that. But and I can't remember the name of it, but it's this website that it used to be somebody else. They'll call you on your phone and you can have a conversation with it. It's just like an operator essentially for a business, and you can test it. But it will pick up on, if you're angry, if you want to have a joke, if you want to hear snark, it knows based on your tone. But how realistic is that? How accurate is that? I couldn't tell you. But, that stuff's out there for sure. Yeah, that's all nuance. That's the stuff all these tools are trying to nail right now, is just human nuance. You know, comedy, like we were talking about earlier, images, drawing, you know, audio, like it's all nuance, what makes something sound good. And that's up to everybody to decide that, so. Yeah, we don't know nothing.
I'll just add something quick. I thought of something about that when Anna was showing her agent, and there was a point at which she looked up, and I thought that's unnatural because like in that moment she wasn't thinking like the way that we would like look up to think about something, and those timings and details, like the voice can have the ups and downs and whatever, and the imagery you can watch somebody that looks away or looks around or whatever it is, but getting those to line up is wildly challenging. I mean, 100%. We're not there yet, but that's coming soon, I'm sure, like everything else.
I'll add one more quick shower thought to you. So two things come to mind. I've tried some of these sentiment analysis tools. Maybe there are good ones now, but my first attempt looking at a call, it's kind of like, oh, it's happy, now it's sad, now it's frustrated, now it's angry, and like the emotions are flying all over the place. No, if like someone's frustrated with the AI, they're like, you stupid robot, I hate you. And so like, it's pretty easy to tell from like the transcribed text, yeah, this person, it's like way easier to tell from what they say now, but I think it will get better. But what you said about nuance being everything, I think is right. And just for a real world example, something that I've had a hard time with is at the end of some of my calls, I want to ask like, sometimes, do you have, let's take, I think in Massachusetts, I think the state Medicaid program is called Apple Health. So I want to ask them, do you have Medicaid or Apple Health? But the AI sometimes will say, do you have Medicaid or Apple Health? Or it will sometimes say, do you have Medicaid or Apple Health? And so it will like, instead of phrasing it as like, do you have this or not? It'll phrase it as like, do you have, and so then people, they get confused and they like reply, oh, I think Medicaid, right? So that nuance is everything, and that's like the hardest thing to nail down right now.
Okay, we have a little less than 10 minutes left. Question in the back here.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, guys. It's actually really, sorry, I'm louder than I think. This really great conversations you guys have been having, and I really love the presentations. I was building something a few months ago that was working towards like having conversations back and forth, and I think the major thing that I was running into that was difficult was the voice to text. That was the place where like all of the errors were coming in. It's pretty like straightforward to get the, you know, the voice to generate from the text, but the opposite direction, the state of the art, at least in my experience, has not been great. And I guess this is probably mostly for Trevor / Travis. If you, but if anybody else has something to comment on, I'd be appreciative too.
Yeah, it's so hard. The biggest bottleneck often, besides the nuance, seems to be the inaccuracy of the transcription model. That is like the limiting factor of building great voice AI. It's like so hard. You can't collect someone's email because you're like, spell your email. Okay, G. But like, sometimes it's G, sometimes it's T, sometimes it's B. Like, it's just not there. So you kind of learn to recognize what those things are and essentially avoid them at this point. I do love DeepGram's new Nova 3 transcription model. I think it came out maybe 3 weeks ago, and it's awesome. It's about like, they already had the best one, in my opinion, on the market, Nova 2. Nova 3 is something like 50% more accurate than Nova 2. So we, leveraged that, and it solved a ton of our problems overnight. So it's getting better. Hopefully not a limiting factor for long. Yeah, the question is, how does it do with accents? So far, so good. I haven't, maybe I haven't personally seen that issue with like our demographic of callers. But so far, there are like slight difficulties, of course, or maybe the AI is like asking them to repeat a little more often, but it seems to handle it pretty well, in my experience. Do you know anything about that?
Add one tiny little bit of understanding to this. The reason that the understanding of the speech is so difficult is because these models are actually not like really good at a broad range of diverse things. So you're talking about, you have a human voice, then maybe you're outside, then maybe you're talking on a cell phone, then maybe you're on a landline, maybe you're in a recording studio. So like the same word can sound so different in so many places, and there's only so much content that you can have for reference for that. So high quality studio recordings are probably going to be a lot more accurate than, say, anything else.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes and we're going to wrap. And then in a half hour, we head to a secret undisclosed location for an after party. Next question in the front here.
Hi, thanks everyone. Great presentation, great sharing information. Kind of a compound question, maybe a little bit of a legal nature. So voice as an intellectual property. So David Attenborough had an issue with his voice. Someone using his voice. Okay, is it trademarked? No, I guess not. Am I correct or no? All right, so anybody can really use it unless I'm somewhere wrong. So let's take that as a one thing. Another thing, let's say someone wants to take a voice of a famous actor that is no longer alive, dead, and that person uses that voice for a criminal activity. How does that gonna be in a court of law, for example? Can I be trademark or can I violate anything, et cetera, et cetera? Thank you.
One of the reasons I use the example of the million similar voices, which is probably a pretty conservative number that you'd have a hard time confirming, but there's reasonably that many people out there that sound close enough to you that you'd have a heck of a time patenting or licensing or trademarking or saying, that's me, right? David Attenborough maybe is an exception in the sense that he has a career based around his voice and he's exceptional in that way. But for the other David Attenborough sounding people of the world, or you or me, what's 200 sets of numbers that say that that's you? I mean, so how do you really defend that it's you? But if I took your voice and used that to access your bank account or something like that, there's a crime that's been committed. And I suspect that we'll see some kind of riders on top of these crimes that's aggravated if you're using, if you've abused someone's voice to commit a crime. It's not just the crime itself, but it's that you did it in that way. I suspect those are the types of things that we're going to see come out of this. But to your first question, technically, there's very little, if anything, that's in place today that would prevent these things from happening.
So we got a voiceover guy that sounds just like Morgan Freeman. He's a real dude. He lives in Hawaii. He's living his best life, right? And we call him Norman Free Guy because he sounds just like him and he costs a tenth of the price, right? And we have him narrating like Whirlpool 100-year anniversary videos and stuff like that. Nobody's suing him, right? But if James Earl Jones, suddenly, he sold his likeness, his voice to Lucasfilm, right? And to create a custom AI model of him, got an enormous payout for his family, for his estate. That's the legal person that can go after anybody based on that, right? So it's less about the person, more about the estate that they line up, right? So there's all of these legal implications that are out now that tech is advancing further and faster past. So all these solutions that we're talking about right now are probably a good year, 3 years behind where things actually are. So it's your likeness, and if you have that trademarked and copyrighted, and you have an estate around that, you can go after somebody. It doesn't matter if it's Norman Free Guy or the voiceover model that sounds like him, right? And you're trying to sell that or sell a product, that's, regardless AI or not, that's still a legal no-no.
Wasn't Scarlett Johansson upset with OpenAI?
She sure was.
Did she have any legal standing, or did they just back off?
I think they ended up settling with her just to keep it on the cool with, but she couldn't prove that it was actually her voice model, I believe is what happened. Yeah, Scarlett Johansson, So, but the fact is there are a lot of people that sound similar to celebrities. A lot of people make their entire careers about it.
Okay, I think that's a wrap. Please join me in thanking our great speakers.